cold, heat and grime. Available in all sizes.
Panasonic VHS tapes up to 4 hours of sport.
Express it, the locker answering machine.
All right, 90s kids, it's time to feel old. And Gen Z, get ready to have your minds blown, because we're about to introduce you to a bunch of stuff that once ruled our world, but has now vanished like a free AOL trial compact discs. So, whether you're here for nostalgia or just to laugh at the ancient relics of a time before smartphones, join us as we dive into 25 everyday items from the 90s that Gen Z has probably never seen in real life. Alright, let's talk about a 90s staple, VHS tapes. Before Netflix, before DVDs, and long before streaming, if you wanted to watch your favorite movie, you had to pop a video home system or VHS tape into a VCR, video cassette recorder. And here's the kicker. If you didn't rewind it before returning it to Blockbuster, you were basically a criminal. VHS tapes had this weird, clunky charm. The tape could get tangled, and you'd have to stick a pencil in and manually rewind it like a caveman. And let's not forget the tracking button, because without it, your movie would look like it was possessed. Imagine having to wait 3 whole minutes just to rewind a movie before you could watch it again. No skipping scenes, no instant playback. Just patience and a bit of frustration. Before USB drives, Google Drive, and cloud storage, we stored all our important documents on floppy disks.
They give total performance in every environment. Cold, heat and grime. Available in all sizes.
These were square, fragile little things that could hold a whopping 1.44 megabytes, which is less than a single high-quality photo today. Imagine you finish your school project, pop your floppy disk into the computer, and bam! Your file is gone forever because floppy disks were insanely unreliable. And let's not forget, if you bent one or spilled anything on it, game over. Oh, and saving anything took forever. None of this automatic cloud backup stuff. You had to manually drag and drop files onto your disk and pray it didn't get corrupted. Gen Z, you've probably seen the save icon on Microsoft Word. Fun fact, that's a floppy disk. Yep, the save symbol you've been clicking your whole life is based on a piece of 90s tech you've probably never touched. Before voicemail was built into every phone, the answering machine was the gatekeeper of missed calls.
If you want to do well in school, you have to keep up with current events.
Express it, the locker answering machine.
In the 1990s, these clunky little boxes sat next to landline phones, armed with tiny cassette tapes or digital memory to record messages. If you weren't home, callers would leave a message after the beep, sometimes awkward, sometimes urgent, and often cut off mid-sentence. Checking messages meant pressing a button and listening to a robotic voice say, "You have 3 new messages." Many people even recorded funny or dramatic greetings to entertain callers. But as cell phones and voicemail took over, the answering machine became obsolete. Before Spotify, before iTunes, and before MP3 players, we had cassette tapes. And if you were cool, you had a Walkman. Cassette tapes were a struggle. If you wanted to hear your favorite song again, you had to rewind. And it wasn't instant. You had to hold down a button and listen to the tape whirring backward.
Man is a tiny stereo cassette player with truly incredible sound.
And sometimes the tape would get eaten by the player and you'd have to perform open heart surgery with a pencil to fix it. Making a mixtape for your crush? That was a real effort. You had to record songs manually from the radio, waiting patiently for the DJ to stop talking before hitting record. No playlists, no skipping songs, just pure dedication. Gen Z, your AirPods are great and all, but nothing will ever match the thrill of walking around with a Walkman strapped to your belt, pretending to be the main character in a 90s movie.
Hello, honey. I'm home.
No, miss! No, don't go, miss! Don't go in there! There's a burglar in! Who is that?
Anyone could mistake Sharp's giant picture tube TV for real life.
Flat screens, HD, streaming. Pfft. Back in the day, we had chunky cathode ray tube or CRT televisions that were heavier than a small child and took up half the living room. And if you wanted to watch television, you had to deal with rabbit ear antennas. these metal rods that you had to adjust every time the picture got fuzzy. Sometimes you'd have to stand in a weird pose, holding the antenna at just the right angle to make the signal work. And don't even think about moving too fast, or the screen will turn into a static nightmare again. Oh, and let's not forget changing channels. If you lost the remote, you had to actually walk up to the television and turn a dial.
So what's that make me? Fish sticks?
Oh, are you hungry?
Oh, no. By all means, feed it. Play till your heart's content.
Look, Goldie. I took good care of her, and she changed again.
Back in the day, before we had smartphone games and virtual pet apps, we had Tamagotchis, tiny, egg-shaped digital pets that were needier than a toddler on a sugar rush. These little guys demanded non-stop attention. You had to feed them, clean up their pixelated poop, play with them, and make sure they were happy, or else. Ignore them for too long. Boom. Instant pet funeral. Now, picture this. You're sitting in class, casually sneaking your Tamagotchi out of your pocket to tap a few buttons and keep it alive. Suddenly, your teacher catches you and doesn't care that your digital pet is literally starving. Detention and a Tamagotchi ghost? Brutal. And if you completely forgot about it? The gut-wrenching guilt of turning it on and seeing a tiny tombstone was unmatched. Gen Z, your phone notifications have nothing on the sheer panic of keeping a Tamagotchi alive.
Over 10,000 videos, 3 evening rentals, so no rush, no hassle. Fast checkout, 24-hour quick drop return, open late every night.
Before Netflix and chill, there was Blockbuster and hope you find what you're looking for. Back in the day, watching a movie wasn't as easy as clicking a button. You had to physically leave your house, drive to a real store, and walk through endless aisles of video home system tapes. Friday nights were serious business. You'd scan the shelves, judging movies entirely by their covers. Because, let's be real, nobody actually read the back. But if someone else rented the movie you wanted, game over. You had to wait days for it to come back, hoping the last person didn't scratch the tape or forget to rewind. And don't even get me started on late fees. Forget to return your tape on time? Blockbuster acted like you owed them your firstborn child. Back then, watching a movie meant leaving the house and risking late fees if you didn't return it on time. That was the struggle we lived through. Before Spotify and streaming, we had compact disc binders, these huge, bulky cases stuffed with all our favorite albums. And if you were really on top of your game, you'd organize them like a pro, by artist, genre, or even by the vibe you were feeling that day. Going on a road trip? You'd pack at least 20 compact discs because if you wanted to switch up the music, you had to physically swap the disc while driving. Super dangerous, but hey, we made it work. Oh, and those scratches. One tiny scratch could make your favorite song skip like a broken record. So you'd try to carefully handle each CD, but of course some still got messed up. Think about carrying your entire music collection in a giant CD case instead of simply tapping a screen. That would be a real workout, wouldn't it? Can you believe we didn't always have those cool mechanical pencils? Nope. Back in the 90s, if you wanted to take notes or finish a test, you had to use an old-school wooden pencil, and that meant you were constantly sharpening it. There were 2 main types of sharpeners. First, the tiny handheld ones that made a mess by spilling shavings everywhere. Then there was the big wall-mounted sharpener in classrooms that sounded like a jet engine every time you used it. But the worst part? Snapping your pencil lead in the middle of a test and having to do the dreaded walk of shame to the sharpener, while everyone stared at you. Gen Z, your handy little clicky mechanical pencils definitely saved you from the struggle we had to face back then.
Every week, TV Guide magazine tells you what's new, who's who, and puts television's world in perspective.
Now, before we had all these fancy on-screen TV guides or the magic of streaming, if you wanted to know what was on TV, you had to grab a physical TV guide. Yep, a real magazine that came every week. It was like a mini phone book full of every show and exactly when it aired. You had to flip through it to plan your TV time. Miss your favorite show? Tough luck. There was no DVR, no rewind button, and definitely no binge watching later. You had to wait an entire week for the next episode. Back then, you had to plan your entire schedule around when your favorite show aired. There was no option to just pull out your phone and watch whenever you wanted. Now, that's what real commitment looked like.
We're the Kodak Fun Saver cameras. Black Hat World, here we come. Film and camera, all in one. We go where no camera would dare. We're here to save the day.
And speaking of tech from back in the day, disposable cameras were a thing before smartphones took over. You got 27 shots and had to hope they weren't blurry. There were no filters, no retakes, and certainly no seeing the pic right away. You had to wait to develop it, and pray it looked good. When the film ran out, well, you just bought a whole new camera.
Hello?
Hey Todd, it's your girl Stacy on my new Swatch phone.
Stacy, baby, what's shaking?
I've got some news. I'm pregnant!
Before smartphones, we had to use those corded phones. If you wanted some privacy, you'd stretch that spiral cord across the house hoping no one caught you in the act of chatting. Oh, and if someone else picked up another phone? Game over. They could hear everything. Gen Z. Imagine being tied to the wall with a phone and no chance to multitask.
Okay guys, here's how it looks for today.
Motorola has made it easier to stay directly in touch with those important to you.
Mom, we got a better idea. I've got to... We'll page you.
Motorola Pagers for the messages you can't afford to miss.
Before text messaging took over, there was this awesome little gadget called a pager, or beeper. If someone needed to reach you, they'd send a numeric message to your pager which would just show a number. No fancy words, just digits. Then, you'd have to hunt down a payphone to call back and find out what they wanted. The pager was like a badge of coolness. Doctors, drug dealers, and the popular kids all had them. Having one was like saying "Kami nai." Hey, I'm important. I'm needed. Now, picture receiving half a message and then having to track down a phone booth just to find out what someone meant. Sounds like a hassle, right? Staying in the loop back then was a whole adventure.
Lisa Frank makes the coolest stickers. I should know because I have most of them. See, me and Jenny, who's like my absolute best friend ever. We went to the store and there's all these stencils and pens.
If you were a kid in the 90s, your school supplies had to be Lisa Frank. It was basically a rule. Forget simple, plain stuff. Everything you had was neon, glittery, and covered in rainbow animals that looked like they'd just jumped out of a psychedelic dream. Pencil cases, folders, and notebooks were drenched in sparkly dolphins, magical unicorns, and fierce leopards. Honestly, it was like a full-on explosion of color and fun. Now, Gen Z, we see your minimalist vibe with all those sleek, aesthetic designs, and yeah, they're cool. But let's be real. Nothing can top the chaos and charm of a Lisa Frank Trapper Keeper filled with all those glittery, vibrant creatures.
Here it is. I mean, hey, everybody knows this is the greatest encyclopedia in the world. Help me get a B+.
Why not an A?
Too long. I found so much great information I put it all in. Overkill.
Before Google was a thing, if you wanted to find something out, you had to rely on an encyclopedia, a massive set of books that covered literally everything under the sun. Need to research for a school project? Forget typing a few keywords and hitting search. You were stuck flipping through pages, praying your parents had the most recent edition because, let's be real, there was always that one outdated volume. Gen Z, think of Google, but instead of instantly answering your questions, you'd need a huge bookshelf of heavy books to get the same info. Talk about a workout. Sounds like a nightmare now, right? All right, we already touched on Blockbuster, but here's something that will blow your mind. Rewinding a VHS tape was like a whole ceremony back in the day. When you rented a movie, you were expected to rewind it before returning it. If you didn't, you'd get a big ol' "Be Kind Rewind" sticker on your tape as a reminder. The kicker? Video home systems or VHS players were super slow at rewinding, so people actually bought video home systems or VHS rewinders, these little machines that would rewind tapes super fast. Imagine having to manually rewind a YouTube video every time you wanted to watch something new. You'd be stuck watching that spinning wheel of death forever. It was a whole other world back then. Before we had unlimited data and free long-distance calls, making a phone call outside your city or country was a whole ordeal. People had to buy prepaid phone cards to make it happen. You'd get your card, scratch off the back to reveal a secret code, then dial about 20 numbers just to connect the call. It was like playing a phone version of a secret mission. And if you run out of minutes halfway through your call, well, tough luck. Think about having to dial a long string of numbers every time you wanted to call a friend, without a second chance if your minutes ran out. That was the reality of phone cards. Before PowerPoint took over classrooms, teachers had these huge overhead projectors. Basically, old-school machines that projected handwritten notes onto a screen with these clear plastic sheets. Sounds cool, right? Well, here's the catch. If the teacher had bad handwriting, you were lost because you could barely read what was on the screen. And let's talk about the smudging. If they used a dry erase marker instead of the permanent kind, the whole thing would turn into a messy blur halfway through the lesson. It's like trying to take notes while the teacher's shadow blocks half of the screen, and you can't even zoom in like you do on a computer.
Friends, don't pay those high mail order prices. Look at this 386SX. 44 meg Seagate hard drive, 1 meg of RAM, beautiful VGA color monitor.
Ah, the good old days before flat, slim LED screens. We had cathode ray tubes or CRT monitors, the big, bulky ones that looked like they belonged in a museum of tech history. These monsters were so heavy they could break your back just moving them. They'd take up half your desk and were basically the desk's new roommate. And turning them on? Well, it wasn't as easy as hitting a button. You had to wait forever for them to warm up, and they'd make this annoying buzzing noise like an old television trying to come back to life. Staring at one for too long? Goodbye. Perfect eyesight. Those flickering screens were basically a headache on standby. Gen Z, your shiny, lightweight iMac, but weighing 50 pounds and needing a full workout just to move it. Sounds like a nightmare, right? Before USB ports made life so much easier, charging your phone in the car was a total struggle. There was this thing called a cigarette lighter port, which, let's be honest, wasn't meant for charging phones at all. But we made it work, right? You had to buy a separate adapter just to plug your phone in. And let's just say it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. The adapter barely worked, so your phone would charge super slowly, if it ever did. Plus, if you hit a bump or the cable even wiggled a bit, that plug would pop right out and leave you screwed. Think of it as your phone dying on a road trip, and you're stuck relying on some cheap, temperamental charger that barely works. Yeah, we survived that.
I took the faster, simpler, less expensive, and far more colorful one, and that made all the difference.
Back in the late 1990s, the iMac G3 was the ultimate symbol of futuristic tech. With its bold, translucent plastic shell in vibrant Bondi blue, it looked nothing like the boring, beige computers of the era. But this wasn't just about looks. It was Apple's comeback machine. Designed by Steve Jobs after his return to Apple, the iMac G3 was all about simplicity. No floppy drive, just a sleek all-in-one design with a handle on top and easy internet connectivity. It made computers cool again. For many, this was their first taste of the internet, email, and digital creativity. Today's kids might find it clunky, but in the 90s, this colorful machine was the future sitting on your desk. Okay, picture this. You're cruising in your old car, but there's no Bluetooth, no AUX cords, and definitely no Spotify. How do you play your own music? Well, we had to use a cassette adapter. What's that, you ask? It's a plastic, fake cassette tape with a wire sticking out of it. You'd plug that wire into your CD player, or MP3, shove the cassette into the tape deck, and just pray the sound didn't come out sounding like a broken speaker. Now, imagine this. You're trying to jam out to your favorite tunes, but instead of popping in a playlist, you're stuck playing music through a literal fake cassette. Sounds wild, right? Imagine this. Before Wi-Fi and high-speed internet, getting online meant connecting through your home phone line, And let me tell you, it was slow. I'm talking about a time when the internet felt like it was crawling through mud. And, as if that wasn't frustrating enough if someone picked up the phone to make a call while you were online, boom, instant disconnection. But wait, it gets worse. The sound of the connection, a nightmare. It was like a screeching robot having a meltdown in your ear. Gen Z, just picture this. You're in the middle of something online, and suddenly, the internet shuts down because someone called Grandma. Pure chaos. No Zoom, no Netflix, just a ton of waiting around while you heard that awful noise. Before we had iPads or mobile games, there was this classic toy that made you want to throw it out the window in frustration. The handheld watering toss game. Picture a clear plastic container filled with water, and inside were these tiny floating rings. The idea was simple. You press a few buttons to make tiny water currents, hoping the rings would land on the pegs. Sounds easy, right? Wrong. No matter how many times you clicked, those rings never went where you wanted them to. You'd end up rage-clicking for hours trying to line up that one perfect shot. Now, picture trying to play a game with no touchscreen, no updates, no Wi-Fi, just a simple, maddening struggle with zero rewards. That was the real deal back in the day. Before you could just hop online and order a custom graphic tee, we had to get creative with iron-on transfers. Here's how it went down. You'd pick your favorite image, print it onto some special paper, and then carefully press it onto a plain t-shirt using a hot iron. Sounds easy, right? Well, it wasn't. If you didn't get the pressure just right, or if you moved too fast, your awesome design would end up crooked, burned, or even peeling off before you could even show it off. Think about it this way. You buy a cool t-shirt from your favorite band, only to have the design start peeling off after just one wash. It was a do-it-yourself disaster waiting to happen, but also a fun, creative challenge that made each shirt feel like your very own masterpiece, even if it didn't last long.